Welcome to the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast, where our hosts, Jeffrey Wilson and Pat Militich, probe the minds of experts from a vast spectrum of knowledge on how to best prepare for the inevitable emergency situation to come. Jeffrey and Pat in the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast are your insurance policy moving forward. And now, here they are, the hosts of the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast, Jeffrey Wilson and Pat Militich.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, revving up the rocket ship, the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast comes back to you again. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jeffrey Wilson. Jeffrey, what's going on down in St. Louis today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Enjoying this nice chilly fall afternoon. Daughter just got home from school. Life is good, man. Life is good.
Good. Well, we're excited to talk to our next guest who is offering and has spent many years in solution-based mindset. That's what we want to always focus on, is not the problem, but the solution. So our next guest, Eric Stoffers, who is the founder of, and CEO, I should say, of BioXcellerator, and also the founder of Healthier World Foundation, the Healthier World Foundation. And Eric, we want to thank you for coming on the show today. We're excited to talk to you about BioXcellerator because we know you've been doing amazing things for athletes, for combat veterans, for a myriad of people, from different walks of life in your program.
Yeah, gentlemen, thanks for having me. And I'll just a brief correction, but only because it's pertinent. When you're in a solution mindset, which I very much am, our foundation is Solutions for a Healthier World Foundation. So we are solution people.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. And we can we'll definitely dissect that as well. And so I'm somewhat familiar, with BioXcellerator and some of the process because I went through before the whole lockdown thing happened and everything. You folks had me scheduled to go down to Colombia to partake in that, and I was very excited about it. But of course, the lockdowns happened, and I didn't renew my passport because God knows when they were going to unlock, the lockdown, so to speak. And so I was not able to make it down there. But I've talked to a lot of people that have, and so a lot of good things are happening. Can you kind of explain, how the genesis came about, of creating this entire venture?
Yeah, so it's somewhat of an interesting story in the sense that I do not have a medical background. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist, but I am running a highly advanced scientific company and a health company. So the reason that transpired was because my mind was in a solution-based mindset. Basically, what was happening in my life, I was the CEO of a real estate investment trust. I was a real estate guy, and my girlfriend at the time was in the pharmaceutical industry. And she was coming home telling me these stories about how the pharmaceutical industry was controlling what her doctors were able to prescribe to the patients. And it really just became somewhat disgusting, almost of a joke, around the dinner table at night. And so, that really started my mindset, turning towards why, as an entrepreneur, what could I do to help change the American medical system? And then it was just really luck in the sense that I was selling a large property. It was 300 hectares on beachfront property in Cabo San Lucas. And I was helping a friend sell this property. And we were not getting good offers from the typical big hotel conglomerates like Starwood. So we were thinking outside of the box. I'm from Arizona. I lived in Arizona at the time. And, being a border state, there was this hot button term that kept coming up in the news. It was medical tourism. So I just said, hey, let's think outside of the box. Let's market to some medical tourism providers. Why don't we go to plastic surgeons and ophthalmologists and dentists and see if they're interested in this property? And none of that worked. It was just too big of a property, didn't work out. But who did come across our plate while we were doing that marketing is a group of stem cell scientists. And they really wanted to get their technology out of the laboratory and into the hands of patients. And that's kind of when I said, boy, I've heard about this stem cell therapy on the news. What is that? Let's take a deeper dive on that. And, over the span of, 24 months or so after that, I became enamored in the science. I was a self-study. And then with this other group, I really got to dig deep and see how many people were legitimately being helped right now and And then why was it not available in the United States? And as an entrepreneur, that was a huge challenge to tackle. And so I did it. I founded BioXcellerator.
So before we get into the conversation, if you don't mind, kind of define some of the terminology. What is a stem cell for the layman or woman?
Yeah, good that we back up into that. So stem cell in it of itself is a cell in your body, and we all have them, but they're known as the building blocks of life because it is the only cell that is able to divide and continuously divide throughout your life and replicate itself and take on many functions. So it can essentially divide to turn into tissue or bone or hair follicle, a whole myriad of different types of cells. But these are also cells that, as we all do, we all age, and these cells also age, and so they slow down in their replication. And so what our science has been able to achieve is a multiplication, a purification and multiplication of those stem cells with some pretty highly advanced scientific work. But it's able to now cure, or not cure, but in some cases, really extend the life of people in chronic pain, or reduce the symptoms of autoimmune disease, tackle neurological conditions, and then, of course, we treat a lot of professional athletes for orthopedic conditions also.
And I think, go ahead, Jeff. I can.
I was just curious, not to go down
maybe.
No, I'm just saying. I just had a question because I remember hearing this term, and I know you're not a doctor or a scientist, but do telomeres play a role in any of this? As far as when you start talking about the lifespan of a cell, I've always heard like telomeres. The longer the telomeres, the longer this lifespan of a cell is. I might be wrong on that. Does telomeres play a role in any of this?
Well, yes, they do. And we sure hope that stem cell, in the theory in the scientific community, is that stem cell is a component, not the full story, but a component of continuously keeping the telomeres at a longer length. I'm not saying that they extend the telomere, but what we think they do, and it's still too early on to really know, there's not enough research, but what we think they do is they slow the shortening of the telomere, not necessarily extend. So once that telomere shortens and there's no more of it, the cell is dead. And once all of them die, you're dead. So yeah, stem cells play a part, an important part.
And this, I'm guessing, this is hypothetical, and certainly I don't have a scientific background. I've spent a lot of years researching organics and what it does for the body, the cells, all the different components of that. But, if we're putting stem cells into the body, of course, the newness or the replication of those cells then is going to have, I guess, newer DNA, so to speak, thus would have newer telomeres because telomeres are on the end of the DNA, right? Yeah,
but the stem cells work a little bit differently than that.
Okay.
So even though we are introducing in most cases hundreds of millions of new, fresh, potent, pure stem cells, and we use the stem cells that are derived from the wart and jelly piece of the umbilical cord. So to start, that is not the controversial stuff that you heard in the news back in the 2000s. This
Right.
is not embryonic stem cells. This is a healthy baby and a healthy mother going home and living healthy lives together, when typically that umbilical cord would be just thrown away, medical waste. Now, this mother and this family are able to donate that umbilical cord to scientific companies like ours, and now help hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the process. So it's non-controversial, but we take that umbilical cord and we take the most healthy, pure, and potent stem cells. We replicate them to hundreds of millions. When we put those in somebody's body, even if it's just through an easy IV or an orthopedic issue, whatever it might be, when we put them in your body, really what they're doing is they are signaling the rest of your body, which is still the miracle, that your body, your stem cells are the miracle. We're just helping accelerate that. So they're signaling all of your cells to get active again and to start doing what they were supposed to be doing and they failed at before.
And so how are these, obviously they're from umbilical cords, so they're very fresh, very new, for the growing fetus, so to speak, and the development of a fetus. But I think there's laws that restrict certain umbilical cord usage, I guess, in the United States. Is that not true?
That is true. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the FDA is very, very far behind in their regulation, meaning they just haven't been able to catch up with how fast the science has progressed. It'll be legal at some point, but they're just not there yet.
Yeah. So I mean, in America, they'll pull your blood and then spin it, so to speak, and then pull your own stem cells out and then inject those back into you, maybe in a location of an injury. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so that's the adipose tissue derived stem cells. So that'd be pulling fat from your belly or wherever. That's adipose tissue. There's a secondary pull that they do also, which is a bone marrow extraction. And so typically that's, a big, huge, long needle, and they puncture your iliac crest, and it's very painful. And now they're sucking out a bunch of bone marrow. So you have a deficiency of bone marrow now in your hip. And so, that in and of itself has a lot of complications, but you're also taking out these stem cells that are your age or my age, so in my case, they're
Right.
46-year-old stem cells that, if they were able to keep up with the replication and the immune modulation that I might need with an autoimmune disease or whatever I'm suffering from, well, then I wouldn't have needed the transplant to begin with. So that the point is that it's a antiquated, really kind of lower level science in our opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, in America, just for instance, in terms of treating cancer, for the most part, from the way I've understood it, is, treating cancer in America, if you don't do it you're regulated, I guess, that it has to be chemo, radiation, or surgery to be able to do that. So I'm guessing, I'm just throwing this out there, that you've seen people who maybe have survived the cancer, but they're so beat up from the chemo and the radiation that then they need, the stem cell therapy.
Pat, imagine that. Imagine that. I mean, this is the truth in the U.S., but our doctors have to prescribe you chemo and radiation. Big insurance and big pharma make them prescribe that first, even though they may know for a fact that there are other alternatives that could give this individual patient a fighting chance before taking on these terrible chemicals that have these, irreparable, side effects. So that's just the way our medical system works, and it's a shame.
Yeah. So
imagine that.
Yeah. So, we've all been associated with people and loved ones who've gone through cancer treatment. Some have lived, some have not, families, loved ones, friends, just we've all been touched by it numerous times. So it's been tragic to watch the way the American medical, AMA and the way that they've approached all of this and done this, especially with all the years of knowledge, I guess, and research that I've done over, there's so many products out there, so many foods, so many ways of approaching things to becoming healthy in numerous other ways. But what kind of results, I guess, is the best question, the best way to pose it, have you seen from people who've been beat up from the chemo and the radiation? What did they come in, what was their physical situation when they came in, and, what were they like a month after they left?
Well, let me clarify a little bit, because we're going down the rabbit hole of cancer, and cancer is a little bit different in the sense that there are some type of advanced therapies that are showing remarkable results for cancer. CAR T technology is incredible. But to clarify, our company does not treat cancer patients. We don't have the exact technology. In some cases, it depends on what type of cancer, and there's hundreds of types of cancer. So
Sure.
Stem cells do have mesenchymal stem cells have anti-tumor characteristics. So I'm not saying that they can't be good with certain types of cancer, but as in a generalization, BioXcellerator does not treat cancer. But I can answer you in the sense that we do have patients that are cancer survivors, and a lot of what they've survived, a lot of the symptoms that they've survived are actually caused by the chemo
Sure.
and by the radiation.
That's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have the same thing with people that have antibiotics that they have taken, that they have these now terrible symptoms, lifelong symptoms, until they found stem cell, because of stripping all their digestive flora of good bacteria because of antibiotics.
Which ends up being called C. diff for some people that might be familiar, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we treat patients with very rare conditions like this all the time.
And so I guess, do the stem cells basically help reduce inflammation within the body?
Yeah, that's the first thing they do. So they reduce inflammation. They help modulate your immune system. So they could upregulate or downregulate depending on what your body is going through. But so it reduces inflammation, it stimulates repair, and then it modulates your immune system.
Okay. Jeff, go ahead, buddy.
What are some of the legal issues? I remember years ago, I think it was Peyton Manning or somebody like went over to Germany or somewhere to get a bunch of shots in their neck. What is the legal issue? Are there certain applications that they're able to do here? Just the load's different, I guess. Like down in Colombia or Venezuela or wherever, South America, you're able to use, I'm just throwing these, like 4 million units, where in the United States you can only use 300,000. Like, what's the legal differentiation, and why? Why is it? Is it the kind of the resistance from the American Medical Association, kind of like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's that. To the last part of that question, your guess is as good as mine. But I will tell you that pharmaceutical companies and big insurance, they dictate how doctors are allowed to prescribe alternative therapies. But so getting back into the root of your question, really, what our cells do and what makes them more potent than what you would find in the United States is we're able to do an expansion process. So we culture expand these cells. We take the mesenchymal stem cells, which are the magic stem cells. They're the ones that are more pure, more potent, and safe. So safe and effective. And we discard all of the rest. So as Pat was talking about earlier, you have those two different types of extraction where you take the adipose tissue or the bone marrow, and then you just repurpose it. Well, you're not just taking mesenchymal stem cells, you're also taking a whole host of other type of cells that really they're not purposefully doing the work that you need them to do. So we discard all of those cells and we focus just on the MSCs, the mesenchymal stem cells. And then we multiply those. So we multiply those to be hundreds of millions of times more potent. And that's really the differentiator. In the United States, the Food and Drug Administration, and by the way, the FDA is a great organization. They have great leadership. They're here to protect the American public, and they've done a great job. Where they lack, as I was saying before, is they lack in their ability through bureaucracy to keep up with how quickly technology is advancing. They're going off of an old regulation. It's Part 1271 in the Health and Human Services Code that says you can do minor manipulation to a cellular-based product. Well, the truth is that we do more than what may be defined as minor, and we don't even know what that is because they haven't defined it. So it's really more of a gray area than it is a legal or illegal.
Well, a lot of times we find that, anything that involves government is cumbersome and slow as molasses, and that's just the way it is. It is the Three Stooges of operations, and it's unfortunate, but that's a big reason why they're not keeping up with you guys.
But even if they did want to change it, because look, the truth is, Pat, we just went through a major pandemic, a global pandemic, and we had Operation Warp Speed. Right. And so we know with the right motivation and the right politics and the right lobbying, like maybe a pharmaceutical company wanting to lobby for the speed to market, that we would be able to do it because we've just seen it being done. But it's the opposite for us. We have people fighting against the speed to market in our case.
Without being too conspiratorial about it, do you feel a lot of that resistance? Because it seems to me like the allopathic kind of model is more about treat and keep on the pharmaceutical dole than actually cure. It sounds like something like what you're doing, it really is something more that sidesteps the pharmaceutical industry to a large extent. Do you think some of that is, it seems like an obvious answer, but do you feel that it's kind of deliberate, the resistance that you get because it's more in the realm of curing than treating and keeping people on the pharmaceutical revolving door?
Yeah, look, we're a healthcare company, not a sick care company. We do 100% focus on getting to the systemic cause and the root of the problem, not just masking the symptoms and continuing to prescribe. Our best patient scenario would be coming in for one treatment and never having to see that patient again. That is our hope. Now, that's not always the case. This is still an evolving science, and sometimes, people's conditions are more severe than others. So we do have people that have to come back on an annual basis or every 3 or 5 years. But to your point, we definitely are not having the same goals that big pharma has. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we're
sense.
different.
Makes sense.
I was having a conversation with a friend who's a combat veteran, and he had some pretty serious health issues, and then he basically told me what those issues were, and I said, so what did your doctor do? And well, he prescribed me these painkillers, he prescribed me this and this, and I said, awesome. I said, did he give you a 4-point plan, a 6-point plan, a 10-point plan of how you were going to eventually be able to get off of those medications? And he looked at me and he goes, well, when you're a effing doctor, I'll go ahead and listen to you. And I said, look, dude, I consider you a friend. I care about you. I'm not getting any money from you. I don't look to make a bunch of money off you, but I'm just saying, next time you go see him, ask him, how are you going to help me get off of these drugs? That's all you need to ask him. And then watch him bumble around, and he's going to say things like eat better. And then when you ask him, what should I be eating specifically, or what supplement should I be taking to assist my body to get to where I don't need these products, he's not going to know what to say to you. That's not what they're trained in, and that's just the way it is. So we've got to go to people, with expertise in different areas in terms of treatments like what you're talking about and what you guys are doing to be able to find solutions to these health issues.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing. Like, look, my whole company is full of medical doctors and specialists in, MDs with a specialty or PhDs that are in the laboratory. So this is no knock against doctors, but it is crazy to me that, that our American medical system is dictated again by big pharma and insurance. Doctors can't even really prescribe what they want in a lot of cases. But even if they could, or they wanted to, a lot of times doctors, they make opinions also on things that are not their specialty, and stem cell, of course, is one of them. So, stem cell in and of itself is not medicine, it's science, but it's the science first, and then it's the application of the medicine. So when you have medical doctors that were not taught stem cell therapy in med school 30 years ago, because there's no such thing, making an opinion on the science, and not connecting the two dots, or making a negative opinion and shunning people away from it when they really just don't know, it hurts my heart, because they're not giving some patients an option to get better.
Well, and imagine, we know that there's a lot of doctors out there who, of course, became doctors because they wanted to help people, and then they get themselves caught up in this system, and there's no way out of it. But at the same time, they've got a couple Mercedes Benzes in the garage, a very nice house, a lot of money in the bank, and they're doing okay. And that's an awful tough thing to walk away from, even when you sit there and go, you have an epiphany as a medical doctor or a healthcare professional and go, okay, I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not really helping people. Ultimately, I'm not helping people get better. But I don't know. I couldn't sleep at night very well knowing that I was doing that, but hey, to each his own, I guess.
I think sometimes I go golfing with an orthopedic surgeon here in Phoenix, where I live part-time, and he's a great, very well-renowned orthopedic surgeon, and he's singularly focused on continuing to be better at his craft. And like I was saying before, he's an older guy, he's in his 60s, and so he didn't have stem cell science really in med school, and it's not his specialty, and so he doesn't know a lot about it. But the truth is that he thinks, as most of the great doctors here in the United States think, that it is the future of medicine, but it's too far, it's too new, and they don't know enough about it. And that's just not true. There is no debate in the scientific community that stem cells are both safe and effective for many, many, many conditions. Not everything, but many conditions. So it's a lack of education even in the medical system.
I love the anchor word hijacking, by the way, safe and effective. You've got to use their own language, sustainable, whatever. You have to use their language on all of these things to help people understand it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the truth is we are conducting clinical trials. We write case reports. We have eight epidemiologists on our staff that are just writing clinical trials and case reports and posters for congresses. And so this is what we have to prove. And we have proven it, but there's many other companies globally that have also proven that it's both safe and effective. So it's a true statement.
Jeff,
But I'm a business guy. I say it differently than the doctors most of the time. So they've taught me a lot.
I mean,
Right,
with the
right.
with the resistance from basically the medical community, how has that translated to potential patients who, like Pat was saying, we're so deferential to certain authority figures such as our medical professionals, and there's no knock against them, but it's probably tough to convince a normal person to embrace this kind of technology and these kind of applications of stem cells when it's not really even fully embraced by the medical community.
I'll tell you, that's a really insightful question. And what I have seen transpire since COVID is something remarkable. And it's exactly what you're hinting at, is that, people are having to go against what traditional medicine here in the United States is telling them. And their mindset has switched a little bit, where they're saying, you know what, I actually might not be able to listen to the guy on TV or to my physician that's telling me to do this, because I don't necessarily think that's fully informed. So I'm going to go out and inform myself. And Jeffrey and Pat, these are our patients. These are the patients that are getting healed. They're reducing chronic inflammation, that we may be alleviating chronic pain. We might be prolonging a hip surgery or a knee surgery. We might be helping an autoimmune disease or a neurological condition like both of our friends, Matt Hughes. But that's the point, is that people are in the mindset now to actually do some of their own information. And that's what we need. We need people to be their own advocates and not just take their first recommendation and get a second opinion that might be their own opinion.
Yeah, that's right. And so the one thing that I want to know is, when did stem cell therapy actually start? What was the rough year, when all of this started? Who were the grandfathers, the scientists that, were the ones discovering this?
So the stem cell science in general really kind of started taking shape with bone marrow transplants.
Okay.
Now, at that time, we didn't necessarily know it was the stem cells in the bone marrow that was helping these blood-related cancers like leukemia and the reason that they were doing these bone marrow transplants. But really, at the rudimentary level, that was a stem cell transplant. We just didn't know it at the time. Fast forward to the late 90s, there was a Dr. Arnold Kaplan out of Wake Forest University here in the States. He found what we call the MSC. Now, that used to stand for mesenchymal stem cell. Some people call it mesenchymal, depends on what part of the world you're in, but it's the mesenchymal stem cell. Now, Dr. Kaplan is really making a fight with companies like ours to change it to medical signaling cell, not mesenchymal cell, because really the cells are signaling the rest of your body to either produce extracellular vesicles like exosomes or growth factors like cytokines or whatever your body needs in that microenvironment. That's what the stem cells are signaling. And Dr. Kaplan is still very active, so I would call him one of the godfathers, and we're happy to not just know him, but we pretty early on won one of his awards for being a top-notch stem cell company doing the right thing.
Someone like a Matt Hughes, we've obviously seen what he's gone through, not only from the accident, but having many of visits to you guys down there. Without getting into, HIPAA stuff, or what kind of improvements have you seen, or I don't know if you treated him specifically, but have you seen as far as day one till now, and could that have occurred without stem cell therapy?
You've been listening to the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast with Jeffrey Wilson and Pat Militich. Watch the complete interview on Red Voice Media Premium using the link below, completely uncensored and ad-free. Not a member yet? Try it for $1.